Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Sunday Matinee. I'm your host, Ben Stahl. We are on episode 41. I'm going to be rolling solo this week, no panelists. I miss you all dearly. I know you'll be back soon, but got to get stuff going, and here we go. So let's just jump straight into the news for the week. So we're going to look at the box office real quick, because I thought that was a very interesting bit of news. So Sonic the Hedgehog 2 opened this weekend, and it opened to 71 million, which is better than the first film, and is a record high for a Jim Carrey-led film. But what's more interesting in the box office is for the second weekend, Morbius only took in 10.2 million, a significant drop from its opening weekend, indicating that word of mouth has not been good for the film, um, which is a shame given that Sony has seemingly going all in on their own Spider-Verse outside of the MCU, but it's connected to the MCU. It's still kind of unclear how it works. I haven't seen the film yet, and we'll see if I catch it in theaters before I wait to see it at home. Um, Also opening this weekend was Michael Bay's Ambulance, starring Jake Gyllenhaal. It brought in only 8.7 million. It's considered a bit of a disappointment, given that it's sort of a mid-tier budget action film, and there's been a lot of debate recently about how major comic book, particularly comic book films, big tentpole films, have sort of been what has been cannibalizing theaters in terms of the general discourse, what audiences want to see, what they're willing to go out to see. But at the other end of this, and rather at the same end of this spectrum, I should say, we also have a smaller film, which is Everything Everywhere All at Once, which officially opened wide. It's been playing in select theaters for a few weeks. It's finally opened wide. It brought in just over 6 million, um, in slightly over one third the number of theaters that are showing these bigger films. So it's considered sort of a more of a success, which means that audiences are willing to go out and see these sort of more smaller to mid-tier films. Um, it could just be that audiences are tired of the Michael Bay name. He did sort of draw out the Transformers franchise under his direction with 5 films. Um, it's going to be interesting, and I mean, Ambulance received an A-minus cinema score, which indicates that everyone who has seen it is enjoying it, and it's getting positive reviews, more so than usual from a Michael Bay film. So we'll have to see. Maybe positive word of mouth will reflect its box office in the coming weeks. All right, moving on to a bit of streaming news. The ABC variety show Dancing with the Stars has been renewed for 2 more seasons, but it's moving exclusively to Disney Plus. Now, this is very interesting. It's not often you see a live studio show on a streaming platform. Um, the British show Taskmaster has done this by creating its own streaming service for its own show. But that show is not filmed entirely live. It's its own beast. I'll just leave it at that. But this is unique. You don't often see this sort of thing, and it's the first live series to debut on the Disney Plus platform. So it kind of worries me to see that traditional broadcast television is moving more and more into the streaming space, and this could be the next phase in the streaming wars. I don't know. We'll keep an eye on that and see how many more live studio shows sort of start to make that transition. And in the final bit of news today, this I think is just a hoot. A movie is in development about the Spirit Halloween stores. Yeah, you heard that correctly. So it's starring Christopher Walken and Rachel Lee Cook. It's currently set to debut in October of this year. This is just so interesting to me because, over the years it's been common practice to adapt books, adapt stage plays. In the past, since the 70s, comic books have become a thing. Um, and now we're getting that phase where, we're adapting toys and video games, and now a store is getting its own feature film. So it's just such a strange trend. You got to wonder what is going to be the next thing to sort of to enter that phase of adaptation. You know, very curious. Are we gonna start seeing various brands of kitchenware get a film adaptation? Who knows? Who knows what's coming up next? So that's it for the news this week. Moving on. What have I been watching this week? Well, oh boy. I watched the season finale of Severance, and this series, it's something absolutely special. If you have not been watching Severance, if you have access to Apple TV Plus, do yourself a favor. This is my favorite television program of the year so far. And it has been renewed for a second season, and oh boy, the cliffhanger they leave you on. This is just absolutely excellent television, excellent storytelling. I cannot wait to see where this show is going next. And I I was more emotional during this finale than I have been for a lot of shows recently. So apologies to Peacemaker. You've been beaten out by Severance for my favorite show of the year. Still love you, though. Still love you, Peacemaker. Still an excellent show. Um, I also have, of course, been keeping up with Moon Knight. It's only on its second episode. It's been an excellent Marvel Disney Plus show so far. You don't have to really have any other knowledge of other Marvel stuff going into it so far, which is great. It's great to have a Marvel property that isn't currently focused on trying to connect itself to the greater universe out there, the way that the other Disney Plus shows, inherently have to. You bring in all new characters and all new plot threads that don't need to be tied in. So I'm really appreciating that, and I think Oscar Isaac is giving an absolutely wonderful performance as Stephen Grant slash Mark Spector slash Moon Knight. So I'll shut up about it now, just so I don't get into spoiler territory. I am hoping to get a very special episode of Severance up, hopefully by the end of April. But when you see what it is, you'll realize just how special this one is. And then of course we'll have a Moon Knight spoiler cast the week after that show ends. All right, let's get on to the main topics for the week. Before I jump into our main topic, I'm going to talk a little bit about Doctor Strange here, but I want to first mention that last week I had planned to do an Oscars reaction episode. Unfortunately, we had a family emergency, and I had to step away. So I'm going to very briefly share my thoughts about this year's Oscars telecast. To sum it all up, I'm just extraordinarily disappointed that the show is leaning more and more into a variety show than it is an awards ceremony. People complained the show is too long, and it was longer this year than it was last year, despite the fact that several of the awards presentations were pre-recorded and edited into the telecast in order to save time. So I think this show just needs to be about celebrating the films, and it needs to if you want to get the general audiences invested in these films, it also needs to stop being a show that roasts and lampoons those films. Jokes about how you can't get through The Power of the Dog aren't going to make people want to go out and see it. That's just going to turn people off to it. And Power of the Dog's an excellent film. Jokes about how animation is only for kids and adults are along for the ride to suffer. That really can turn people off to excellent animated films. We just had an episode about Leica Studios, and I think that more people need to be watching those, as well as several other animated films. These films, you know, a lot of these bigger animated films that are done by Disney, by Pixar, by Leica, they appeal to kids, but they are also messages in there for people of all ages. So yeah, it was a frustrating Oscars this year. I think we're at a point where they either need to start moving the telecast. I know I'm typically against streaming, the move towards streaming exclusively, but it may be time to move the Oscars telecast to a streaming service so we don't have to deal with advertisements. Or if you're going to have advertisements, new movie trailer announcements are a great thing. Look at what the Game Awards have done. Now, granted, the Game Awards has faced its own share of criticisms to the point where it's become more about the big new game reveals as opposed to the awards being presented there. But it was tedious to sit through the Oscars and then jump right into advertisements that were mostly just for Hulu, really. So that's my take on the Oscars. I will not be sharing my thoughts on the incident between Will Smith and Chris Rock because, frankly, I have nothing to add to that discourse that is going to shed any new important information or revelations about it. And frankly, at this point, that event has run its course in terms of just general discussion. There's certainly important discussions to be talked about, but I am not the person to be leading those discussions. There are far more qualified people to be doing that. So if you have an opinion on that, think about before you post it. Does this add anything important to the discourse, or am I just howling into the void about what I think personally about what happened? So keep that in mind. All right. It is time to get on to our actual main topic for this week. So, this week is all about a sort of Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness preview episode. We are less than a month of it releasing to movie theaters. Tickets are officially on sale. And let me tell you, it's one of my most anticipated films of the year. I think among Marvel fans, it's one of the most anticipated films of the year, and I think just among general audiences, it's a highly anticipated film. So let's sort of take a look back at Doctor Strange in the course of the Marvel Cinematic Universe and see how we got here and how the perception of the Sorcerer Supreme has changed over the course of the last couple of films with audiences. So, Doctor Strange, originally released in November 2016, written by Scott Derrickson, C. Robert Cargill, his writing partner, and John Spates. Scott Derrickson handled the directorial duties. Derrickson is well known for horror films like Sinister. So, Doctor Strange is the type of character that's right up his alley, dealing with the occult, with the supernatural. Um, and I was extraordinarily excited for Doctor Strange in 2016. He's always been one of my favorite characters from the comics, but admittedly, he's sort of, a B-level character. But we have to remember that in 2008, Iron Man was also sort of a B-level character, not terribly well known among general audiences. General audiences knew Spider-Man, X-Men, Batman, and Superman, and Wonder Woman. Those were like the top tier superheroes that you would expect would get a film made. Um, but then, of course, Iron Man just exploded and became this huge thing. And so Marvel proceeded to adapt a lot more of their characters, obviously Thor, Captain America, even going so far as to adapt characters that, at the time, I would have considered even less well known than Doctor Strange, like Guardians of the Galaxy. So, and they just kept producing hit after hit. So when Doctor Strange came along, it wasn't a big surprise that it was it was a hit. It wasn't huge. It ultimately took in at the domestic box office 232.6 million. Now, while that's a lot of money, that's only the ranked number 18 in the top grossing Marvel Cinematic Universe films domestically. It opened to 85 million, which is only the 19th best opening in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Now remember, this is currently out of 27 films. Now, to get a little perspective on how that looks, I'm going to compare it really quickly to the first films, the sort of origin films that it opened ahead of and that it opened behind. So Doctor Strange ended its domestic run ahead of The Incredible Hulk, Thor, Captain America, the First Avenger, Ant-Man, Black Widow, Shang-Chi, and Eternals. And it is, of course, important to note that Black Widow, Shang-Chi, and Eternals all also opened during the coronavirus pandemic, and that may have affected ticket sales, especially Black Widow, which also premiered day and date on Disney Plus with Premiere Access. Now, Doctor Strange's theatrical run domestically ended behind Iron Man, Guardians of the Galaxy, Spider-Man Homecoming, Black Panther, and Captain Marvel. Now, worldwide, Doctor Strange ended up bringing in $677.7 million, which moves it up slightly. It's worldwide, it's the 16th top grossing film in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Now, it's still opened essentially ahead and behind of the same films, with the one exception. It did do better worldwide than Iron Man 1. This is just, of course, because Iron Man 1 was the very first Marvel Cinematic Universe film. These films weren't huge overseas yet. So it's not a big surprise. But the fact that its box office is lower than Iron Man and Guardians of the Galaxy, that's just an indicator there that those two films really were the lightning in a bottle type of films that don't come along that often. There was something very special about the first Iron Man and the first Guardians. Note, I'm not including any of the Avengers films in these comparisons just because those are team-up films. Those are automatically sort of expected to be much bigger films. So it's just interesting that typically what you would expect is for each origin film to sort of start trending higher as audiences just become more aware of the Marvel Cinematic Universe brand. But that's not really a thing that's happened until recently with the likes of Black Panther and Captain Marvel being the two most recent origin stories to really have a box office that shot up much higher than those Phase 2 and Phase 1 films. So those two, also it's important to note the cultural significance of Black Panther. Black Panther is a movie that a lot of people had been waiting for, and so it's no surprise that it had a huge box office. Same with Captain Marvel. So, and it doesn't mean that Doctor Strange necessarily did bad. It just wasn't as it wasn't as wanted as Black Panther and Captain Marvel were upon its release. And also, it's a little bit more of a difficult film to approach. It changed the game, the way that Thor changed the game in Phase 1 of the MCU. The first couple films of the MCU had felt grounded in a reality not dissimilar from our own. It doesn't seem too far-fetched that in the future we might have people flying around in iron suits, and even though Hulk is a fantastical character, the world that he inhabited in The Incredible Hulk still felt grounded in a reality that wasn't too far-fetched. But then you threw Thor in, and you have a hammer, and you have lightning, and Thor changed the game. And Doctor Strange changed the game once again, and we'd become accustomed to a lot of the same characters, become accustomed to Cap, to Tony, to Bruce, to a lot of these characters who are grounded in a world that is sort of run by science and technology. Here we have magic, and now that the game has been changed, and we've seen Doctor Strange a lot more since, I'm hoping that audiences are going to be considerably more receptive to Multiverse of Madness. Now, how did the original film do in terms of its reception with audiences and critics? Well, it currently stands at 89% on Rotten Tomatoes with critics and 86% with audiences. Its IMDb user score sits right now at 7.5. When it was released, it received a cinema score of A, which is good and is typical of your modern MCU blockbuster film. Now, of course, this is all subjective. Apart from the fact of this is how much it made, all of this information is subjective. You know, we all like what we like. Now, what did I think about Doctor Strange? Again, I was ready for this film, and I absolutely loved it. And I will admit that over the course of the rest of Phase 3, it may have dropped off a little bit in terms of how I would rank the films, only because going into Black Panther, to Infinity War, to Captain Marvel and Endgame, and Far From Home the first time around, those were all big films that felt like they took the stakes really high for the future of the MCU. But upon a recent rewatch of the entire MCU up through about Far From Home, I just looked at Doctor Strange again, and it's back in my top 5. I love Benedict Cumberbatch in the role. I love Michael Giacchino's score. I just love the visual look of the film, what Scott Derrickson brought to it, and what the visual effects crew brought to the look of the film. Not only, in terms of how different dimensions look, like the dark dimension, and just all the different worlds that Strange sees, but also just what is accomplished in the mirror universe. I think it's just visually one of the most striking films in the MCU. So I, of course, have been excited ever since they announced that the Multiverse of Madness was going to come out. So Marvel did something I think really smart over the course of the last few years. Doctor Strange and or Wong have appeared in 5 films outside of their own franchise since. So the first one, of course, was Thor Ragnarok, which was 1 year later. Taika Waititi wrote in that scene. That was not, as far as I know, that was not at the behest of Kevin Feige or anyone at Marvel. No, Waititi wanted to write in that scene where Doctor Strange aids Thor. It's one of the more significant cameos to appear in the MCU at the time of its release. Before then, we'd had Chris Evans appear very briefly in Thor: The Dark World. Anthony Mackie had his very brief cameo in Ant-Man. Those cameos are fun, but they don't add any major significance to the story that they're telling. Strange aiding Thor is pivotal to that first act of the film. And the only other major cameo that has that kind of impact on the story before Ragnarok, really, I would say, is Tony Stark in Homecoming, where he's a pivotal character to help Peter Parker along his way. And Phase 3 continued that trend of having sort of team-up films. Even in Ragnarok, Ragnarok is very much a team-up film with Thor and Hulk. So getting Strange into an established MCU franchise really was able to expose him to a much bigger audience than his origin film was. So I think that helped out a lot. But then in 2018, Strange became a very pivotal character in Avengers Infinity War, where, of course, we finally have the hunt for the Infinity Stones, of which one is in Doctor Strange's possession. So finally, he's a pivotal character to the greater MCU. And not only is he just important from a storytelling standpoint, they really got to explore a lot more with what his abilities could be. His fight on Titan with Thanos, their one-on-one match, is one of my favorite visual moments in the entire MCU, and easily my favorite moment just in Infinity War. So suddenly, Doctor Strange is much bigger than he was before, and he of course would appear again in Endgame, and without him and Wong and the sorcerers of Kamartaj, the finale of Endgame may not have been so spectacular. So he really did play a pivotal role in those two films. And over the course of those films, he got to bond a little bit with Peter Parker, because he had to, of course, ally with him on Titan with Tony Stark and the Guardians. So it was sort of this with Tony gone, with Peter Parker's sort of main mentor figure out of the picture. A lot of people theorized that Doctor Strange might be the next person to come in and fill that void. That a Spider-Man Doctor Strange team-up movie might be the next thing to do, because they had worked so well together in Infinity War. Well, as it turned out, Doctor Strange did end up playing a pivotal role in Spider-Man No Way Home. Now, some spoilers here if you haven't seen No Way Home yet, because this will be important stuff. Doctor Strange's botched spell in No Way Home, of course, opens up the multiverse, and we'll get a little bit more in talking about the multiverse soon. But we once again get to see Doctor Strange doing his thing, not to the same scale that we see him in Infinity War. His role in this is not so much to fight alongside Peter until we get to the end, and even then, Peter does most of the fighting. But he is an important character in that his actions bring about the opening of the multiverse in the MCU. So that brings us to Multiverse of Madness. But how do we get to a multiverse? Well, the term multiverse was first used in Doctor Strange 1, but really that film didn't explore the concept of the multiverse as we know it in the MCU now, as it did the concept of other dimensions and realms. Ant-Man showed us the quantum realm. Doctor Strange showed us the dark dimension. It was less about exploring the multiverse in terms of timelines as it was just other realms and worlds that exist outside the reality that we know. But multiverse was sort of... they didn't bring it back up again until Spider-Man Far From Home. But even then, at that point, it's it was all an elaborate lie. Mysterio, of course, is not from a different timeline, but it would be Peter who would first really experience the true terror of what the multiverse can bring about. Uh, Unfortunately, if you were only into the movies, you missed a huge bit of storytelling in Loki on Disney Plus. Loki is what made the multiverse a reality. At the end of Loki, when Sylvie kills He Who Remains, the prime timeline finally splits into the infinite number of realities. And that is when the multiverse is formed, as it were, but it's not where the multiverse, it's not where the proper MCU timeline is exposed to it. What If television series gave us a tease of the different timelines and the what did happen, if something slightly different were to occur. So it also introduced several key players that either will or will very likely appear in Multiverse of Madness now. So then we get to No Way Home, and of course, Strange accidentally opens up the multiverse with a botched spell, brought in characters from other timelines, literally from other Marvel franchises that were under the umbrella of a different studio, which was an ambitious and incredible undertaking. Just amazing to see Alfred Molina, Jamie Foxx, Willem Dafoe, Tobey Maguire, Andrew Garfield, which was incredible, was absolutely incredible. And I had thought they weren't going to do anything like that again, because there's something special about what they weaved together was a very special Spider-Man story that really brought closure in a lot of ways to Tobey and to Andrew's stories, and set Peter off on a brand new journey. Now, you can't do that with other Marvel heroes in quite such an eloquent way, because one, a lot of the other franchises either didn't develop very far, Ghost Rider, Daredevil, or they're the X-Men, and they have an incredibly long, convoluted, just insane layer of plot twists upon plot twist upon changes in its own franchise. Bringing in the X-Men to the MCU as they stand would be, I think, a huge mess. But something was teased in the trailer, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. So here we are on Multiverse of Madness. It's been over 5 years since the original Doctor Strange debuted, and in that time, it was originally announced in summer of 2019. I believe it was at Comic-Con that Multiverse of Madness was announced at the time. Scott Derrickson was attached to direct. Now, unfortunately, shortly after that announcement, Derrickson parted ways with production as director. He has since remained as an executive producer. It was simply a matter of creative differences between him and Marvel. This is nothing new. It happened with Thor: The Dark World. It happened with Ant-Man. And what I'm hoping is that we get something more along the lines of Ant-Man, where incoming director Sam Raimi is able to take the reins and really make something out of what they had. Now, when Derrickson left, they did not have a first draft yet. So gone was Derrickson and his writing partner, C. Robert Cargill, both of whom you should follow on Twitter. They're really cool. So Sam Raimi was the director who ultimately was brought in to fill that void. And this was, of course, significant to Marvel fans, as Raimi had directed the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man trilogy. Now, Raimi also has an extensive background in horror filmmaking. And since Multiverse of Madness was billed as Marvel's first horror movie, he seemed a good fit. And we'll find out very soon. So The according to IMDb, writers Michael Waldron and Jade Haley Bartlett are the two writers credited with the script, and Michael Waldron tends to get more focus. I'm not sure exactly who contributed what, and I know there have been reshoots and probably rewrites in there. But Michael Waldron was heavily involved with the writing on Loki, so it kind of makes sense that he would jump from the series that introduced the multiverse into the film that's really going to start diving into it. So while I lament the original creative team directing and writing parting ways with Marvel, I'm glad to know that they brought in an experienced veteran who should be able to bring this movie to where it needs to be. And the only other major change is in the music department. Gone is Michael Giacchino in doing his first score for an MCU film is Danny Elfman. Now, this should not be a surprise. Danny Elfman scored the Spider-Man trilogy, so he's worked with Raimi before. This should be fun. Danny Elfman, of course, also scored the first two Michael Keaton Batman films, directed by Tim Burton. So, Elfman is also an experienced veteran who should be able to bring in something incredible to this. And it should also be noted that Michael Giacchino has been very busy of late. He scored recently Spider-Man No Way Home and The Batman. So, I wouldn't be surprised if he was just very busy. So, what do we know about the Multiverse of Madness? Well, we know that... give me 1 second. We know that Strange, Wong, Christine Palmer, Mordo, and Dr. Nicodemus West are all returning from the first film. They will all be played by their respective actors. We know that Zombie Strange and Shuma Gorath will appear in the film. They were seen in What If. It's not yet known if they are the same iterations as were seen in What If, or if they're just going to bring in whole new iterations. Now, other confirmed variants of Doctor Strange include Sinister Strange, which is the one who is very clearly a villain, and could possibly be the film's main antagonist. Defender Strange, who is the one in the trailer who just has the kind of weird-looking outfit and is hanging out a lot with America Chavez. And then Supreme Strange, who has not really made an appearance in a trailer yet, and he may or may not be the same character as What If's Doctor Strange Supreme. But a Funko, the Funkos have been released, and the thing about Supreme Strange is that he does not have the goatee. So it'll be very interesting to see what part he plays in the proceedings. We know that Patrick Stewart is appearing in the film. He's likely playing a variant of Professor Charles Xavier from the X-Men franchise. But we could have the rug pulled out from under us. After all, we all thought that not too long ago that Evan Peters was going to be playing variant Quicksilver in WandaVision, and that was a nice little twist that he was not. So, we know that Wanda Maximoff will be playing a key role in the film, and that a version of her children from WandaVision will appear in the film. It could be the same as the ones who were from the series. They could be variants. They could be a vision. We're not sure yet. At least one Wanda variant will appear, and that is Zombie Wanda. It could be the same Zombie Wanda from What If. It may not. Hard to say. And finally, we know that the film will introduce America Chavez, who in the comic books has the ability to open portals to other dimensions. Now, that's all we really know. I'm sure there's some other small things that we know, of course. We know that Christine is getting married. Yes, yes. We know there might be a variant of her. Yes, yes, yes. But those are the big things that we know. what can we reasonably surmise about this film? Well, assuming that Patrick Stewart is playing a variant of Professor X, there's a shot in the trailer of a chamber with several chairs. Professor X is seemingly sitting in one of those chairs, and that likely indicates that we'll be introduced to the Illuminati, which is a secret governing body in Marvel Comics to which both Professor X and Strange belong to. Other members of the Illuminati include Namor, the Submariner, Reed Richards of the Fantastic Four, Black Bolt of the Inhumans, and Tony Stark's Iron Man. So, we also see some drones escorting Strange that look very much like a sort of Iron Man Ultron type of drone. So I think it can be reasonably assumed that we will see a variant of Tony Stark in this film. And I think the other big thing that we can reasonably assume is we will be seeing a lot of universe hopping and potentially into some of the universes that are introduced in What If. And there are probably going to be variants of characters that we know. Now, the internet has been ablaze with people making predictions and wish lists. And a lot of people are framing this as, in order to get clicks, they'll frame it as, we have inside information that so-and-so is going to be in the film and so-and-so, and this character is going to be in the film. This is just a prediction and wish list. I have no idea what's going on. So what am I going to predict? I predict that we will see an Iron Man variant, but I don't think it's going to be Robert Downey Jr. or Tom Cruise. Now, I don't think it's going to be Robert Downey Jr. because he's been adamant about this is it. I'm done, post Endgame. I'm done with the MCU. He didn't return to do voice work for What If, so I don't think he's going to return to play a Tony Stark variant. Now, a lot of people are just dead certain that Tom Cruise will be in the film as variant Tony Stark because he was sort of the front runner to play Iron Man in the 90s, long time ago. I don't think it's going to be Tom Cruise because he has spent so much time in the last couple of years just trying to get his next two Mission Impossible films off the ground. And those films, they're still working on them. I don't see him having the time to jump ship from Paramount and hop over to Disney to do some stuff with Marvel. He's also been hard at work on Top Gun Maverick, which is, after several delays, also, finally coming out in just a few weeks. So Tom Cruise has been extraordinarily busy. I just don't think he's had time on his schedule to do it. I predict that we will see the Illuminati, but I don't think it's going to be the original lineup from the comics. I think that Professor X will be on it. I think that there'll be a variant of Doctor Strange on it, or possibly Mordo will be on it. And I think that a variant Tony Stark will be on it. Namor is a possibility only because we have had the Submariner Easter egg in Avengers Endgame when Okoye and Natasha are talking about an earthquake in the ocean. So that could have been a tease for that character. I definitely don't think they're going to have Black Bolt on the Illuminati, only because I feel like at the moment, Marvel Studios wants to distance themselves from the Inhumans as much as they can, given that show was received as a complete disaster and nothing good came of that. I don't think we'll see Reed Richards. I just don't think this is the best moment to introduce the Fantastic Four. I think there's a better way to do that. I could be wrong. Remember, these are just predictions. But I don't think so. And I don't want to get caught up in the hype that this is going to be it. This is John Krasinski's big premiere. So I don't want to get caught up in that hype. I don't think it's going to happen. Who's going to be on the Illuminati? I have no idea. But I do know I do think that those three I mentioned above, Variant Tony, Professor X, and either Variant Doctor Strange or Mordo, will be three members of the Illuminati that we will see. I do not think that we're going to see Tom Hiddleston as Loki in a significant capacity. I think it's possible that he will pull a quick cameo, like I was talking about earlier, like Chris Evans in Thor: The Dark World. But I think that Marvel has done a good job of separating Loki from the main events of the MCU, putting him in his own show. Loki had a major impact on the MCU in phases 1 and 2, but in order for Loki to continue growing as a character, I think it's going to work better for him to be, for the time being, outside the main big events of the MCU. In terms of box office, I predict that Doctor Strange will break the 2022 opening weekend record set by The Batman. And I think that's an easy one to predict, only because the pre-sale tickets have already exceeded those set by The Batman earlier this year. So I think it's going to set an opening weekend record for the year, for the time being. I do think it's going to fall short of Batman's domestic take. And here's why. The Batman opened at the beginning of March and has since gone on to, it got a few good weeks in with no major competition. And even after it was dethroned, it still managed to hold its own in the top 5 at the box office for the past couple of weeks. That's not going to be the case with Doctor Strange. Doctor Strange is going to have a handful of good weeks. Let me bring this up here just so I can be absolutely accurate. So Doctor Strange opens officially on May 6th. And 3 weeks later, Top Gun Maverick opens. I think Top Gun Maverick will dethrone Doctor Strange. And after that, June 10th, just 2 weeks later, Jurassic World Dominion opens. So the Batman had several good weeks, and then, it got dethroned by some smaller films, but managed to stay in the top 5 and do respectable business. It's currently somewhere near 360 million. It didn't have the same kind of big blockbuster tentpole films to compete with that Doctor Strange will in Top Gun and Jurassic World. So I think that I would like to see Multiverse of Madness and its domestic theatrical run north of 300 million. And if they really want to really just to really drive home how big I hope it will be, I really hope that it will end north of 350 million. That would put it ahead of Captain America: The Winter Soldier. That would put it ahead of Thor: The Dark World in terms of sequels. That would put it slightly south of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, which ended its run in about 380 million. But it would still be short of Iron Man 2 and 3. Those films are just woof. And it'd still be short of course, big films like Captain Marvel and Black Panther. Captain Marvel actually ended its domestic run about 420 mil. Black Panther ended at 700 mil. So those films did really well. So I'm hoping that this film gets a solid 300 plus. We shall see. Now, those are my predictions. These are my hopes, which are slightly different. I hope this film is going to be able to balance the grand scope and the number of characters with a cohesive story that focuses on its title character. No Way Home is big, it's grand, it's ambitious. It throws in, these classic villains and brings in two other Spider-Men whose performances are beloved, but it's still at its core about Tom Holland's Peter Parker. Civil War brings in nearly the entire roster of Avengers to that point. But at its core, it's still a story primarily about Captain America and his continuing disillusionment with the governing bodies of the world. And then you have Ragnarok, which, brings in Doctor Strange, it brings in Hulk, but at its core, it's about Thor discovering who he's supposed to be. And even Infinity War, that movie at its core, I don't think this is talked about enough. Infinity War, the protagonist, even though he's the villain, is Thanos. It's Thanos' story, but it still manages to bring in everyone else. Pardon me. It manages to bring in everyone else and feel like this great big epic story with all these characters, but it's still got a singular focus. So I hope that they're able to do that with Doctor Strange. I worry about this film becoming too big in terms of audience expectations with, oh, well, No Way Home. They were able to bring in all these characters. Now with Multiverse of Madness, they need to do all this and bring in Ghost Rider, Nicolas Cage, and bring in all the old X-Men and blah, blah. And I worry that there's going to be a sense of disappointment when it doesn't do that. Or there might be a sense of disappointment if it does do that, and then it just doesn't focus enough on Doctor Strange. We'll see. So I also hope that this film does for Doctor Strange what Winter Soldier did for Cap and what Ragnarok did for Thor. Those two, especially poor Thor, like audiences weren't quite as along for the ride with Thor as they were with a lot of other characters because his first two films, they're received, mostly okay. And Thor as a character just isn't as interesting in the Avengers films because you can tell in those films the main conflicts are between Tony and Cap, the two leaders. So Ragnarok really took Thor in a whole new direction and saved his franchise and saved his character and made his characters feel ridiculously relevant again. I would love for Doctor Strange to feel that relevant, and I think that his appearances in Ragnarok, Infinity War, Endgame, and No Way Home have helped, and I think that will help contribute to a film that will at the very least be more financially successful than the first film. So I hope that this film doesn't waste Mordo, who parts ways with Strange and his fellow sorcerers at the end of the first film. I want Mordo to feel like a definitive antagonist, and I don't think this is the film that's going to do it. I could be wrong, but if Mordo survives this film, I would love for Mordo to be set up as the main antagonist of a third film. And I would love for him to sort of fill the void that has been left behind by Loki as the sort of tortured antagonist. Because Mordo, like Loki, is a character who fell from grace and has turned darker as a result of that. So I hope that we get to see Mordo, a much more focused Strange and Mordo story after this. I've said this already, but it's in the notes. I hope this isn't how we are properly introduced to the Fantastic Four and the X-Men. Professor X probably going to show up. I don't need him to be bringing along, a bunch of other actors. And I really don't think it's the time to introduce an entire new cast of X-Men, an entire new cast of Fantastic Four. The introductions of Spider-Man and Black Panther and Civil War, I think, are comparable to what that might do, but those are well weaved into their story, and that's a story that needed a big cast. And they were already surrounded by several established characters. It was very much an Avengers sort of 2.5. So if they're gonna do something like that, they have to balance that storytelling in a way that works. And despite the fact that I am worried about how big this film is going to be, I hope there are some surprises in store. Um, and part of that reason of that being is a lot of Spider-Man No Way Home. Uh, it was leaked either just by Alfred Molina just spilling the beans about his appearance, and that ultimately snowballed into, oh hey, if Alfred Molina's in it, surely Toby's in it. If Jamie Foxx is in it, surely Andrew's in it. And then leaks just kept on happening, and then it was like, yeah, they're all there. It would have been, we talked about this on the No Way Home spoiler cast, it would have been a monumental surprise for audiences if uh, all that had been kept under wraps. And it's possible to keep those type of things under wraps. You know, I've said it before. The death of Han Solo in The Force Awakens. Didn't see it coming. That was never leaked. You know, took me by surprise in that moment. Um, the most recent James Bond film, No Time to Die, had two pivotal moments in it that were not leaked. That was like, yeah, those are big things that you'd think would get leaked, and they weren't. So, you know, it's possible to keep this kind of stuff under wraps, and I do hope that, on the one hand, showing your cards with Professor X prevents that kind of thing from getting leaked. But now it's setting up this expectation of, oh, if Professor X is what they're willing to show, then what do they have in store for us? So I do hope they have something in store for us, and I just hope it doesn't get leaked. And I'll say this again. I hope that audiences don't set the bar for this film so high based on what they just saw in No Way Home and are let down if it doesn't play on cameos and nostalgia. I just don't want that. So that's what I have to say about Doctor Strange this week. I'm so looking forward to this one. I think it is. It's my most anticipated film of the year. So I'm very excited to see it. I've got my ticket. I'll be there opening night, and I'll be excited to share my thoughts on the show later in May. So obviously, since I don't have a panel today, we will not be doing trivia. That being said, I have not pitched to you wonderful viewers in such a long time. Please send in your trivia questions, multiple choice, 4 answers, and give me, of course, the correct answer. I need to know it. And send those to fisheyelenseesall@gmail.com. And yeah, that's our show for this week. This has been episode 41. The plan right now is to come back next week with a look back at the legacy of Daniel Craig as James Bond. Now that we've completed his 5-film arc, it's time to really dig into what it's meant for audiences and how it's different to what we've seen in the last 60 years of James Bond. So hopefully hopefully that'll happen. If not, it's because the Severance episode will be dropping next week instead. Again, I have a very special plan for that one. I'm not sure when it's going to drop, and you'll know why when we say it. So, thank you very much for watching. Get out there and enjoy some films in the movie theaters. Remember to keep doing it safely. We are not through with this pandemic yet. Keep your safety and the safety of other patrons in mind. So, enjoy a movie. Go out there and see. Yeah, I'm going to say it. Go out there and see Everything Everywhere All at Once. That's my plan for this week because I think that film looks incredible, and it's a multiverse film. So May as well get that sort of multiverse vibe going before Doctor Strange comes out. Thank you very much for watching. Have a good day.